What's up, everybody? This is Connor Allen, sports betting and high stakes manager at 4 for 4. Join me today for a special FFPC Playoff Challenge show. And we're going to build a prize pick slip is John Paulson, the man behind all of our projections and one of the godfathers of 4 for 4. Paulson, Packers are in the playoffs. Regular season is over. How good are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling good. Getting through the grind that is the NFL season as a ranker, projections guy, and I'm not complaining. It's just the same thing every week for 18 weeks. Then you get into the playoffs, and there's fewer games, so it's a little bit easier there. You get the playoff materials out for the draft, one and done type drafts, or the FFPC Playoff Challenge, which we're going to talk about today. And then you get past that, you just start looking. I've been pinging you on Slack talking about props all morning. It's nice to have some free time to kind of look at this stuff.
Yeah, no, 100%. And props are awesome in the playoffs. They offer way more. I think it's easier to dig into them. And we're going to start the show off here with a prize pick slip because lines are moving. There's a couple of bets at prize picks that we're interested in, but sportsbooks are pulling it off really quick here with all the weather, with all the injuries coming up. So I personally love these weeks. When there's uncertainty, there's almost always more money to be made. So I think let's hop in here and build a prize pick slip. We can just kind of go back and forth on, I think it was 3 that we were looking at here off the top. You want to dive in? I think the first one was Tyler Bass kicking points under, correct?
Yes, and it was just at 7 like 15 minutes ago, and now it's at 6.5 at Prize Picks. And you said that they're pulling this off the sports books, right?
Yeah. DraftKings and FanDuel just pulled it. So
this game is going to be weather. It's going to be a problem. We're looking at 26 mile per hour winds. Snow as well, 0.4, 0.3 inches per hour. The temperature is not terrible. It's like 20 degrees, but it's still pretty cold. And then if you throw in the wind there, the wind chill is going to be, it's going to feel like 5 to 7 degrees. So this is going to be tough, I think, for Bass to hit even to hit 7. You're thinking 1 field goal, 4 extra points, or 2 field goals and an extra point in order to get the over on the 6.5. And I think the kicking is going to be really tough in this game. They're probably going to go for it a lot on 4th down if they are anywhere close because of the risky nature of taking field goals when there's 26 mile per hour winds. The ball's just going to go sideways.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's a great look here. It's not a conventional prop that I think either of us look at, but when there's like these kinds of conditions, I love betting like longest field goal unders and like under and kicking points. If you guys see any longest field goal props, please DM me, ping me on Discord, whatever, because I know that they posted under 47.5 longest field goal. That's just like borderline free money. So let me know if you guys see that. And then Jeff Stenberg in the chat here, is he talking kicking? That's my language. Yeah, Jeff, show later. We'll touch more on some kicker props as well. I know Jeff's a big kicker guy. But the other 2 that we were looking at here, I believe, another one was Tua Tagovailoa under, I believe it's 232.5 passing yards. This is one of my favorites, may or may not be discussed on a later show as well. But specifically, this game is going to have temperatures that feel like negative 25 degrees. I personally just don't see how these quarterbacks are going to be able to feel the ball extremely well throughout the entire game. It also, we were talking with our buddy Chris Allen, former 4 for 4 guy, also a weather specialist, I would say, has done multiple studies. Basically, grip strength is very, very difficult when it's that cold. So, the only people that we've seen have success in games this cold was like 2008, and that was Brett Favre, who's an absolute psycho, was jogging outside in like freezing temperatures. Like, he can grip it and rip it. Tua Tagovailoa cannot do that. So I like the under there. And I think that the matchup too, Kansas City's defense, they're more of a run funnel. You can run on them. You can't really pass on them as well. So I think that's my second addition there. And then what was the last one we were looking at, JP?
The last one was the Joe Flacco over 37.5 pass attempts against a improving Texans rush defense. He hasn't, in his 4 starts, hasn't gone under 42 pass attempts. They're in the dome. All these games we're talking about weather, but this one is in the dome in the friendly confines, and he has just been going extremely pass heavy in his 4 starts. They're playing kind of a pass funnel with the Texans. Their pass defense is pretty bad. That's the way they can move the ball. He should have Amari Cooper back. David Njoku and him are really vibing well. So I think 38 is a pretty easy number for him to hit in this one.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, 42 plus in 4 of his last 5. Only game he didn't hit it was against the Jets, where he had 29 pass attempts, but he threw for over 300 because, of course, Joe Flacco is crushing one of the best secondaries in the league. That's just the end of the
game.
It's crazy. Anyways, I think that's good. So yeah, we're gonna go with those 3 legs. Paulson and I have been messaging about a bunch. I'm being a little bit more aggressive this week with some of my looks, including the Tyler Bass under and mixing it up with a couple of James Cook overs and Stephon Diggs unders, things like that. So but anyways, this is an FFPC show. We wanted to get that off the top here in case they pull the Bass under, because that is, getting looked at as the temperatures get worse. But before we dive in, want to remind everyone, your fantasy football season may be over, but betting in DFS still kicking all the way through the Super Bowl. You can get all of our DFS plays for $6.99, includes all of TJ's work, all of TJ's look at cash games, tournaments, everything. And then if you want to get everything, just $19 through the Super Bowl. I mean, even if you're betting $5 a pop, you'll make your money back plus plenty more. I think that the Discord is super valuable. There's a lot of good tools, and we have provide bets as well. So you can go to 4for4.com/plans if you want to find that specifically. All right, FFPC Playoff Challenge. There's a lot of rules that I can dive into here off the top. That's probably the easiest way to get started, I think, right, JP?
Yeah, and this is something that it wasn't the wild card, the first iteration of this, but it was the divisional round one that you won a few years ago, right?
Yeah, me and the legendary Joe Pano, who has been, consumed with his 15 children and, working, grinding his ass off. But, Pano's super sharp, and a lot of, I'll touch on that multiple times, but we did win that. And it was basically on the back of Raheem Mostert. Instead of playing George Kittle, which everyone played, we played Raheem Mostert, and he had that was the year where he had 200 plus rushing yards against your Green Bay Packers. Unfortunately, I'm sure you don't have quite as fond memories of that as I do, but yeah. So that we'll touch more on it in a bit here, but just off the top, rules for the playoff challenge. So there's 2 different entry fees. There's one for $200, one for $35. The $200 one pays out $500,000 the first, $100K to second, $50K to third. So pretty strong prize pool. It's not completely all up top where the Millie Maker's like $1 million up top and the second place gets 100K. It's not super flat either. I think they did a good job of doing the payouts there. There's no draft. The way it works is you pick a total of 12 players. So 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 4 flex, 1 defense, and 1 kicker. You can only pick 1 player from each team, and your team locks when the first game is played. So this whole contest locks Saturday at 3 o'clock, 3:30 Eastern, something like 4:30 Eastern. Whenever the first game is played, whenever the first game is played, that's when the contest locks. No changing players, no late swap, none of that DFS crap or anything. So I think it's important to note all of that there. Also, scoring is PPR, tight end premium, which is a universal quirk of FFPC, meaning the tight ends get 1.5 points per reception, which makes them a little bit more viable in the flex. So that's basically just the basic rules there. But Paulson, I would love to get your thoughts on any, I guess basic strategy, anything you look at with expected games, rankings, projections, etc., or anything you'd like to touch on off the top.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you mentioned that there's 2 different contests. 7,800 is the max amount in the $200 level, and I think it's 17,000 is the max amount of entries in the $35 level. So your approach for either might change a little bit, based on that size, because you might need to be a little bit more unique in that $35 level, whereas the $200 level, you can probably play a bit more chalk if that's what you're comfortable with. I sort of look at it like we get our expected games played for each team, and then we apply our fantasy points per game for those players, and then try to kind of cobble together a roster that makes sense. But there's a lot of strategy and mind effing, I guess, is the word that I'm sitting here looking at, because you really want to, or you have to fade to a certain degree 4 different teams. 2 teams won't have a player in your lineup at all. So those are you're trying to pick 2 losers there, and then you want to soft fade 2 more teams. That means your kicker and your defense, because they don't score a ton of points, but you're basically expecting those teams to lose fairly quickly, maybe in the first game, hopefully, so that you are in the next week's round with 8 skill players. That's the goal. And then you also are looking at double points for Super Bowl. So you want to try to pick 2 high scoring players that you think will be in the Super Bowl for you to, get those extra points in the Super Bowl. So to me, it's a lot of, I'm here as more of I want to learn. But I'm also have a lot of thoughts about these games to sort of kind of craft a roster around. But I think the best thing to do is not try to play, oh, I'm going to, play all the averages and try to kind of field the highest mean team, but to try to kind of like figure out a scenario that would happen that might be unique, that allows you to, if you think the Packers are a live dog, or you think the Dolphins are going to lose for sure, you might want to fade one of those teams and be unique that way, because not a lot of entries will fade, like the Dolphins or some of these other teams.
Yeah, no, that's well said there. And I think that the best way, at least the way that I go about it every year, is I go team by team and then look at which players I think are the strongest plays, which ones will probably be overused and I'm not really as interested in. And then which ones are kind of, like leverage plays where I think, well, maybe if this team loses, this player could go off. You're getting more from that player and they're going to be lower owned. So it is kind of a DFS style game in a way, but I think it's much more simplistic. And I think frankly easier to win and cash here. We're also looking at some decent overlay potentially for FFPC. So I think there's still like 2,700 spots available, and this contest locks in, a little bit over 24 hours. So could be some reasonable overlay there as well. And then my only, strategy point here would be just pick your spots with leverage and don't be afraid to go all in on those. I mean, you'll know pretty quick whether you lose or not. But if you think the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl, playing Josh Allen is probably the optimal route here. You're not getting a ton of advantage over the field, but like you're looking at a team that Josh Allen is crushed at fantasy points wise, and he's almost certainly going to be the leading scorer on their team by a good margin if they do make the Super Bowl here. So with that being said, I have some ownership projections from Pat Kerrane that I'd love to kind of, touch on occasionally if we need to touch on. And then I think you have some as well from maybe a couple other sources. So if we want to kind of talk about like leverage, talk about fades, things like that, we'll probably be leaning on those. Correct, Paulson?
Yeah, I got Chris Wecht from Fantasy Points. He projected as well, along with Kerrane. So I've got both of them here that we can discuss. Another good article that I read was Matt Schaaf over at Draft Sharks. I just wanted to give him a shout out. So trying to, get my head around some of the strategy and things I haven't thought about. So I am coming from a standpoint of one lineup. You're going to do two, right? In the $200.
Yeah, two, maybe more. I did a bunch with Dalton last year. Dalton Cates. He likes to, rip off a couple, and then Steve Boynton here in the chat may want to do one or two. So I think it really depends because if I feel really strongly about certain spots, again, I'm not afraid to be more aggressive and do like 10 entries. But if I don't really feel that good, which as it stands, I don't really feel particularly good compared to previous years, I probably was limited to like 2 or 3. So that does change the strategy though.
Yes. So you're looking at it from a multi standpoint. Also, you might, rip some more if there's overlay. That's always smart.
Definitely.
But I'm just coming at it from one. So here's my start is I'm just going to lay it out here. I'm just going to start Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey, because I do think that the Ravens and the 49ers are by far the best chance to be in the Super Bowl. And those two kind of, I think, do well together, because on Baltimore's side, Lamar Jackson is easily the highest upside guy. And I think on the San Francisco side, McCaffrey is great as well. So those two together combine. And then I'm just going to try to get my variance with the rest of the roster.
Love it. Yeah. And I think that we can probably start the conversation with Christian McCaffrey, specifically in the 49ers. So like McCaffrey here is going to be, Kerrane's projecting 80% owned. I'm sure other people are in the same spot. Is there a chance here? And I have it listed as CMC as like my bold number one. And then the leverage plays being Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Brock Purdy. If you want to get a little strange, are you even considering doing anything else, or is it just like a CMC lock button for one lineup? I think it has to be, right.
I think that they're going to make the Super Bowl. So they're going to play 3 games, and I don't see the chances being very high that one of these other guys outscores him in a 3-game sample. Although you're looking at maybe in the Super Bowl, they could with the double points. But, I 24.6 per game. Debo's at 17 for the year. He's at Debo's the one guy that's sort of interesting. 23.6 fantasy points per game from week 12 to week 17. So he's been hot lately, and he's been up there with McCaffrey in terms of the scoring. Ayuk 16.3, George Kittle 14.7. Purdy is an interesting play if you don't want to take if you're picking them against a team that doesn't have a high scoring quarterback on the other side. That might be a play, but he's at 22.0. There's better quarterback options, I think. Lamar Jackson, obviously. But for me, it's just like if I'm going to play one lineup, I'm going to go with the chalk at the top to, with the Super Bowl, and then go from there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the issue that I keep thinking about when you try and pick like leverage spots where you're trying to, I guess, do better than the field or like maybe switch it up a little bit and be contrarian, you have to think like, is there a reasonable scenario in multiple games where Ayuk, Debo, Purdy outscores significantly CMC? And I just can't get there because even using CMC's full season averages, like he was obviously amazing in the playoffs. That's even more further emphasized. Like they're not giving CMC a break. They're not taking it easy on him. Like there were multiple times throughout the season, they're like, okay, well, we'll use a little Elijah Mitchell to coast the game. Like that's not going to happen unless, the Niners are up by like 30. So I think that, CMC is just basically a lock button play and you're just going to have to gain leverage in other ways. But I think that brings up a good conversation with the Ravens here. So you said Lamar is your one lineup guy. For two lineups between my two lineups, I'm looking at probably Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, depending on what you think. I think both are looking at like 40+% ownership, maybe 30+% ownership. So really concentrated there. But would you consider anyone like an Isaiah Likely, Isaiah Flowers, probably your only two other considerations for the Ravens? I think that they're okay, but they're not guys that I really, really like.
I can't get there with either of those. Likely is more interesting to me. He 16.3 in the tight end premium from week 12 to week 17 with no Mark Andrews. So there's the potential that he could perhaps outscore Lamar, but he doesn't need to, I guess, if you have a quarterback elsewhere that you want to use. And tight end is kind of a weird spot this year because it used to be Travis Kelce. It was just sort of a stone cold lock to at the tight end position, but I think his production has fallen off a little bit. We don't know whether or not Taylor Swift will be in attendance at this freezing game and on Sunday, or is it Saturday night? Likely is sort of the interesting one. Zay Flowers, 12.9 fantasy points per game, 14.7 in 6 games without Andrews. But for me, I'm betting on the Baltimore, San Francisco Super Bowl. I think those two teams have looked head and shoulders above the rest of the AFC and NFC respectively. I feel like the Bills and the Chiefs have fallen off a little bit. So I don't see them going into Baltimore and winning. It's possible that they do, but I don't really see it. And I think the 49ers are head and shoulders above the rest of the NFC as well. So for me, I want Jackson and McCaffrey. I could see doing something different in the 35 if I had like 10 rosters or something, like mixing it up.
Yeah.
But for a $200 bullet, I think that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, we have some good questions here in the chat. So Darren Summer, shout out Darren, by the way, great high stakes grinder, super sharp. He said, punch myself in the face if I picked Likely and Andrews came back for championship Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's yeah, right. But I do think it's possible. I mean, it's not out of the range of outcomes there. But I was going to ask you, so if you don't pick Lamar quarterback and you have to pick a Raven, obviously, because again, they're going to go far. Who are you picking? Is it Isaiah Likely? Is it Zay Flowers? I think I went with Zay in my non-Lamar Jackson lineup. I
would go Likely due to the tight end position being kind of weird. That's for me. And then the running back situation is like if you maybe in the $35 and you're doing 20 lineups or something, Justice Hill has been like weirdly outplaying Gus Edwards, but Gus Edwards gets the touchdown. So you could, I just don't see a 3-game span where those guys are getting it done and giving you enough. Go ahead.
I mean, Gus would have to score like 10 touchdowns in 3 games for it to be worth it. Which again,
he's not like a 200-yard upside guy like Mostert is either. So it's got to be touchdown equity for him. But Hill's been getting. I don't see it elsewhere with that roster. So for me, it's Lamar.
Yep. Yeah, it's very fair there. Cool. Well, yeah, I think that settles a lot of questions with the Ravens there. Moving on to the Bills. So I think Josh Allen is a fantastic play. The other play that's going to be 30+, 40+% owned. Again, just been massively high scoring option. This first game, though, we talked about massive temperatures. Like it's not going to be a massive blow up game for a guy like Josh Allen. James Cook in this 1-game sample could very easily outscore Josh Allen in this game here. So does that make you consider a guy like James Cook at all, or are you more interested in Diggs? Gabe Davis was just announced out, as Steve pointed out here in the chat. And then there's also Dalton Kincaid, who's gotten a little bit more run now that, I don't know, I guess it's been uneven, but, they're finally being like, hey, this guy's awesome. We should just put him in no matter what. So any consideration outside of Josh Allen for you here?
Yeah, talking about the Bills, this is an interesting one because, even before this weather situation really came on the front burner for me in terms of the projections, I was already thinking James Cook. He has been scoring 15.9 since week 10. Stephon Diggs been a little higher, 16.2 for the season, but those two are pretty close. And then if you look at the situation now with the Steelers in this really windy, cold, snowy game, I think that plays into James Cook's hands more than it does the passing game in general. And then if a game next week would probably be against correct me if I'm wrong, the Chiefs at home. So they are kind of a run funnel as well now. They're tougher against the pass than they are against the run. So Cook, unless they, the one worry there is that they start running Lenny significantly, but he's been seeing a lot of touches, Cook, and I think he's the best play. If you're not going to play Josh Allen, I think Cook is the best play. However, I do know that receivers tend to have, the higher ceilings and the lower floors, and sometimes you want that variance in this type of a contest. Kincaid is a bit tempting again because the tight end position is really weird, and he is a dangerous player. 13.5 in the tight end premium since week 7. But for me, it's Cook. I just think that the two games that we're likely to see him play in, first two games, Steelers, probably Chiefs, both good rushing matchups for him, and he's been playing well.
Yeah, and I think Darren brings up a good point here in the chat. Does Josh Allen grabbing rushing touchdowns or carries bother you with Cook? Josh Allen, we saw, I believe, 15 carries last week. I expect a ton of carries this week, probably a lot of design runs. I think we're going to still see probably plenty of Lenny here. Side note, if you have ESPN bet, you can bet on the Bills to have over 30 carries as a team. I also think that that's just free money as well. So I bet whatever I could on that. It does worry me, I think, but I think his total usage in terms of receiving game usage, which hasn't been strong the last 2 weeks, but was super strong post Joe Brady coming in. I think we see more of that against the Chiefs the week after, and probably not much this week, but all he has to do is rumble in like once or twice, over the course of 2 games. And I think that he probably makes up enough there. I think I could see you going Diggs though. He did see his routes run decrease in like 4 or 5 weeks. And then last week we saw 96% route participation, and now we have no Gabe Davis. So, I mean, he's going to be out there all the time. It's the playoffs. Maybe he's hitting an age cliff. I don't know, but I think that he's still pretty solid there.
What do you think about his ownership projections? 28% for Wecht, 32% projected by Kerrane, compared to Cook, 18 and 17 respectively. Dalton Kincaid, 12-8. Would that play into your thinking at all if you were going to use a non-Allen player for the Bills?
Yeah, I think so, because again, you're getting a player like if you're getting Cook at 18%, right? I mean, your lineup is already pretty contrarian, relative to the rest of like one of these fields. Like even if you went CMC and Lamar, like you can go a little bit chalkier, then you probably need like one other pivot or have no other dupes, maybe one big pivot or maybe 2 smaller ones. So yeah, I think that definitely should play in a factor there as well.
All right. Which team should we talk about next?
Let's do I have the Steelers because I have it next on my list because of the who they're playing, but I have them as full fade defensive, special teams, or kicker. Do you have anything else there? I mean, they're 10-point dogs in terrible weather.
I am full fading the Steelers. I don't know how this pans up. I guess it could, but it's for my one lineup. I'm definitely not going to play any Steelers.
Yeah, if you want to be, outrageously contrarian, Najee Harris, if somehow they manage to win, it's probably on the back of him. He's going to be 1% owned. Again, the week after, they're going to play someone really good, so they're going to have to throw, but maybe Najee Harris runs for some touchdowns. Super contrarian, but that's like, borderline galaxy brain, I think.
Yeah, I think you're overthinking it.
Yeah, right. All right, move on to let's do Rams-Lions next. So this one's a fun game. Get a little bit of that weather stink off us there. So for the Rams here, I think that we're looking at probably Puka or Kupp, but I think that the big one is going to be Kyren Williams. I expect him to be really highly owned. we had a conversation about this offline. Any thoughts on your end about which one of those three? I mean, you could go Stafford too, but that's super contrarian as well.
Yeah, when I initially put my lineup in, I just went with Puka, and then I started looking at the numbers. Kyren, the projection is 55% with Wecht, 48% Kerrane, so he's going to be probably half the field's going to have him, and I can see why. 21.3 fantasy points per game this season. Then you look at Puka, who you would think is up there in that sort of range, but then if you look at the 12 games with Kupp, 15.7 fantasy points per game. He's 21.9 fantasy points per game without Kupp. So he's been a good bit lower with Kupp. Kupp is at 14.8 in 11 healthy games. So given the, I think I'm either going to go Kyren or maybe Kupp. Given the difference in the ownership projections for Nakua versus Kupp, 21% to 8% for Wecht, 28%, 17% for Kerrane. It just seems like, given how close they are in scoring when they are both playing, that Kupp has that, contrarian feel or whatever, and has that same sort of upside as Puka does. Like, it's amazing that we're looking at Kupp as like the third option for this contest, because he does have a mega upside. And then this is the game. This is the matchup is the interesting thing about this, because Kyren's been great, right? But Detroit's a pass funnel. Will Kyren have the same sort of success? Does McVay just sort of cut it loose, knowing that his advantage is with Stafford and these two receivers and, the other receivers, Demarcus Robinson, et cetera, who's been playing really well, and just air it out. And then you're thinking, if they pull the upset, which I think they could, I don't know how you feel about that. Like, they maybe have a 30, 40% chance to win this game, and they're playing a second game, probably against the 49ers, who are, weaker against the pass. Then maybe that Nakua or Kupp pick pays off again. I don't know. But the chalk is Kyren, and then I'm thinking the pivot, the leverage, I guess it's called, is Kupp.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I'm going to be fading Kyren here, because again, like you outlined, like even if they win, like he's probably not going to be in another advantageous situation here. So like, it's one of those things where I want one of the two guys, either Puka or Kupp, who can take advantage of this Detroit secondary. We've seen Detroit, just get ripped by any pocket passer. I think this is like a complete nightmare matchup for their defense. We just saw Nick Mullins, throw for like 300 plus passing yards against them multiple times. Like, I mean, this is just like, I think, a complete disaster for Detroit's defense here. And so I think we see the Rams come out, throw the ball extremely well, and either Puka or Kupp is going to go off, maybe both. I mean, I think that both is very much in play here. And I also expect Detroit to have success on the other side here. Now, how does Kyren play into that? I think the issue with Kyren, though, is like his receiving work has been diminished in the last few weeks. And that's like a big part here. Like, if they're playing from behind or if they're playing in a high scoring game, you need him to be involved in the receiving game. Like, they're not going to be able to jam him up the middle 20 plus times against Detroit and have success. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with Kyren here. So that's like probably one of my biggest fades on the slate. Like, he's going to be like 50+% owned just because he's been scoring fantasy points like crazy. But I mean, he would have to score a touchdown in my mind, at least one, to really pay off at that ownership.
Well, he only has 5 in the last 3 games, 5 touchdowns. I just wanted to comment on your note about his pass catching. 6 since week 12, 6, 3, 3, 5, and then the last 2 weeks, 0 catches and 2 catches with 0 and 2 targets. So it's interesting that his targets have dropped off. So let me just ask you this: if you were doing 5 $200 lineups, would you fade Kyren in all 5, or would you maybe run him out there in one?
Maybe one max. But yeah, I think I'm pretty comfortable fading him just because I think Cooper Kupp and Puka are both like really good options. Like, I wouldn't fade him for some, like Demarcus Robinson or anything, but I think that like both these other options are really strong.
All right.
Yeah, you want to move over to the Lions now? I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be 80+% owned, and I think it's probably a good idea. Leverage there, Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery. Any other thoughts there?
I think David Montgomery might be galaxy braining it a bit. Like, he's sort of in that Gus Edwards. He's got to score 2 touchdowns and maybe do that back-to-back games to sort of be the play. Yeah, Amon-Ra is at 64% for Wecht and 66% for Kerrane. Gibbs is at 19 and 19. So I just wanted to mention this. St. Brown, 20.3 fantasy points per game. Gibbs, 19.4 week 7 to week 17. So
does that include some David Montgomery list games?
Yeah.
Though, right?
Yes, I think yes, it does. But he's been pretty good since Montgomery came back as well. So there is a bit of, and then there's Laporta, who I just kind of, wrote off, but he apparently is going to play, projected ownership 1% and 0%, averaging 16.6 in tight end premium. So that would be
if he was healthy, I think he'd be an awesome pivot. I mean, he's back from the dead. I thought there was no shot that he played this week, maybe not the rest of the playoffs, and he's apparently going to play. So, and the matchup is great. The Rams have not been good against tight ends at certain times. So, I don't know. I mean, how many lineups would you have to play to consider playing Laporta?
A lot. Yeah. If I'm putting my precious 200 in, and it means a lot to me, I'm going to play St. Brown. He's the dog, and I'm going to get my variance elsewhere. It like you said, it's like you don't need, I like Cook, so James Cook. So if I'm going to go with him, and I have one other guy that maybe is 15% owned, and I've got those two in there with a bunch of chalk, it's probably going to be okay, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm also being talked into playing Laporta here in the chat. We're playing Laporta. So apparently, we guess I'm playing Sam Laporta later tonight. That'll be good. I don't think it's that bad, though. The matchup for Goff is also great. I mean, the way to disrupt Goff is by pressure, by playing man coverage. The Rams do neither of those. They play a lot of zone. They don't get a lot of pressure. They kind of sit back and hope you make mistakes, which, I mean, Goff can do. But when he's not under pressure, he's, relatively good at managing the game. So I think that Amon-Ra elite, Laporta could easily score 2-3 touchdowns, even on limited snaps. So, I mean, not the worst leverage at like 1% owned, as long as he plays. All right, let's move on. We'll move to the Eagles Bucks here. I don't know why I have this list the way I do, but we'll jump to Eagles Bucks. This game has the most uncertainty, I think, from an injury standpoint. AJ Brown did not practice again today, I believe. Devonta Smith was a full go. And then the big news too, Jalen Hurts is not really thrown the ball much since last week after injuring his hand against the Giants. This seems like a complete disaster. I know you have been talking about potentially thinking that the Bucks will win. One of the most liquid markets in the sports disagrees with you at being 3-point favorites for the Eagles, but I can see it either way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game and just the Eagles in general.
Yeah, this is like, I've been talking with you in Slack about this, and I'm like, I hate the Eagles. It's terrible. This feels so bad. Like they've lost 5 of the last 6 or 4 of the last 5.
Yeah.
And then you're always like, your response is always, but it's the Bucks. they're not good. I would feel better if this was a better divisional champ than the Bucks, a stronger team, but this offense looks so banged up. I mean, if Hurts is injured at all, is not throwing on Friday, they play Monday night. So we really, have to take everything with a grain of salt. Same with AJ Brown, right? So like AJ Brown probably guts it out, but is he, he's nowhere near 100%. I asked Jeff Muller about Devonta Smith. I think the full practice is encouraging, but he thinks it was a high ankle sprain. So it's just like, maybe in a regular season game, he wouldn't be playing, but this is do or die, right? So he's going to try to gut it out. The full practice, though, gives me, an indication that they're feeling like he's pretty good, in pretty good spot. I don't know. But if Brown sits or is very limited, Smith is an interesting play if you think that the Eagles can win or will win. And then Goddard, obviously, is an interesting pivot as well. I don't think I would go as far as using Hurts as my quarterback, unless you think that this team has a run in them. Because I think if you're playing a quarterback this weekend, you're probably looking at Mahomes or Josh Allen or maybe Dak as a player that can go and play 4 games. So I still because I don't like to fade a lot. I'm looking at my list of teams, and there's a lot of players in those teams that I really like, and I think they're going to play. They have a good chance of playing 3 games. I don't see that with either one of these teams, and I know it's dumb to full fade the Eagles and soft fade the Bucks because you end up with a kicker or a defense potentially in the second round, and I'm probably going to avoid that. But these are the 2 teams I have the least confidence in, winning a second game. Yeah,
that's very fair there. And I think that you brought up a good point here. Like, I don't know what projected ownership are you looking at for AJ Brown? Because I'm still seeing 40+% for Kerrane. I mean, that seems pretty high in my mind. I think it'll probably be closer to 20%, 25%. I mean, like hasn't practiced, got an MRI. There was like no word on like what actually happened in the MRI. I think that they're just posturing and he's not going to play. That's just maybe he guts it out, but I would say there's a very low chance that he's more than a decoy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, the one caveat here is the Bucs are a pass funnel. They've been bad against the pass all year, and I would not be shocked if he had like a big game. But just because we don't know what's going on with the knee, he might be like, oh yeah, he knows he's going to play. They know he's going to play, and they're just resting him and trying to give his knee as much time to recover. I don't feel good about it though. Like I think there's a chance of that happening. I always get tied up in this situation where, people have strong takes one way or the other, but I can see both sides of everything and I over consider both sides. So I end up like in a painful state of can't decide. And I think that's the situation here with Monday night. This sucks. Like you don't know what this offense is going to look like by game time on Monday. They could have no Brown, a gimpy Smith, and Hurts that can't throw the ball, or they're kind of, as you mentioned, posturing, but the other way, like, oh yeah, Hurts isn't throwing. We're just giving him, they're just like, well, we're just going to give him the day off. It's a little sore. Brown's not that bad. And they come out and they've got their full arsenal for the most part. So I'm leaning towards this looks terrible because, usually Wednesday through Friday, if these guys aren't practicing or doing well, especially before a playoff game, they're hurting, they're sore, and it's going to be pretty ugly. And plus they've just been playing kind of crappy on top of it. So I think this is a one where the Bucs could win, and I might go with like a Mike Evans. Or did you want to talk about the Bucs next, or did you have?
Yeah, no, I think that's just to finish up my thoughts on the Eagles. I think that Devonta or Goddard are both great leverage plays. You're looking at like 20% or 15% for Goddard, 8% for Devonta Smith. I mean, I think both those are fantastic. If you want to get a little crazy, I don't think DeAndre Swift is a terrible play. Again, you need to score a lot of touchdowns and need to run really pure, but 2-game sample, certainly possible here. Also, Darren brought up AJ just deleted his social accounts, must be dialed in for the Super Bowl run. Yeah, I mean, the social media narrative, he's probably sick of hearing everyone complain or see what's going on and just doesn't want to hear it anymore. But yeah, I think, there's a lot of ways to play the Eagles. Personally, I would just, if you need leverage, I would just play the lower owned ones. If you don't, then, just roll with probably the chalk there.
I just wanted to mention on Devonta too, like, the high ankle playing through that. Let's say Brown is gimpy or, they're going to play 1 or 2 games and he's just not anywhere near 100%. Smith, like you would talking with Mueller about it, his fantasy production should dip, but if he's seeing more volume, that can offset it. So we might get, normal Devonta because he's seeing 2 extra, 3 extra targets per game, or more snaps because Brown is gimpy. So that's just something I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and if he is healthy, I mean, if somehow he is like relatively healthy and AJ Brown doesn't play, I mean, he's like an absolute smash. Like he's gonna crush like 8 to 10 targets. Whatever.
We don't know. We won't know about Brown probably until Monday.
Or Hurts, or if Hurts can play. So this is a total shit show. Good luck, guys. Honestly, I wish I had the answer for you guys as well, but Paulson and I clearly are just still figuring it out. This is gonna be something we're gonna monitor up until lock. Honestly, it could be a last minute decision. Bucks, Evans, Godwin, Rachaad White. I mean, any interest there? I think you could probably play any of them against the bad Eagles secondary. Rachaad White, I mean, you're going to have to get him to catch passes, but he's been doing it all year. So I think that he's viable as well. Any preference among the three?
Evans, 17.3 fantasy points per game this season. He's obviously had a great year. Not as huge towards the end here. Godwin's kind of picked it up a little bit. Rachaad White, 16 fantasy points per game. One thing I noticed about this is that the ownership projections are vastly different between Wecht and Kerrane for White. 7% versus 22% for Kerrane. So 21% for Wecht. For Evans, 30% for Kerrane. So I think there's some disparity here in terms of how much the people are going to play the Bucs. So I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't feel like the Bucs can win a second game.
Definitely.
So, do you want to use one of your positional spots on them, or are they you're gonna hard? Like I'm thinking about hard fading the Eagles and soft fading the Bucs and just living with the results.
Yeah, normally that's not something we'd advise, right? Like we talked about. But in this instance too, Baker Mayfield dealing with like a rib injury was like gimpy all of last time. The last time these teams played, he played horrible. I mean, like he just didn't play well, and like it didn't make sense. Last time these teams met, the whole game just made no sense because the Bucs normally a bad secondary, good run defense. DeAndre Swift ran for 130 yards. Jalen Hurts didn't do a whole lot. I mean, he did fine. AJ Brown had like 130 yards. The other side, Tampa Bay couldn't really run the ball, couldn't really pass the ball. Eagles pass rush was getting home, and we haven't seen any of that since that early season matchup. So it almost makes me think that I don't want to rely too much on what we saw early and kind of just bank on what we've seen the last couple of weeks. So for me, I'm okay with Evans or Godwin if you're kind of like in that range and you're like looking at who to play versus soft fade. I mean, Godwin, we're looking at like sub 5%. Again, if you need leverage, I don't think it's a terrible play. If he plays 2 games, he probably gets you value on that. Even if he doesn't have like an awesome second game, there's a chance where he goes nuts here against his Philly secondary that has been basically routinely burned. And like you said with the Bucs, do you think they can win multiple games? I think absolutely not. They played like 4 good teams all year and lost by double digits, all of them, except for the Bills, who they lost 8 by, but they were down by 14 with 2 minutes left, and they scored like a garbage time touchdown. So I have very low confidence level in them.
But if I'm going to full fade the Eagles, I really have to play a player, like a skill player for the Bucs.
I kind of
yeah, because you want your like Evans or Godwin or somebody or White playing in that second round.
Yeah. Oh man, this is good. So Darren just updated us here. Back to Baltimore. Mark Andrews back at practice today. Oh God, what a mess. This contest is. See, this is one of those years where I'm not excited to like launch off 15 entries because, I mean, this is just a disaster. You can't play him in your contest, right? I mean, like that's like 0.1% owned. Someone's gonna play him, but I mean, oh
wow. Yeah, I see him.
Yeah.
I see him. He's catching passes.
Jesus.
I still think that just plays into Lamar, though. It just makes him a better play. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, I mean, it matters for likely though, because if you get like one good game, 2 good games, and Andrews comes back, I mean, you're just toast. Like likely wasn't even playing with Lamar or with Andrews, and like there was all this whole thought about like, oh, they can play both of them. I mean, that like just never happened in like 2 years. So, yeah, so certainly put some a damper on likely there. All right, let's move on. We got 3 more games, 2 more games. Dolphins, Chiefs. Let's start with the Dolphins. I think this game, another weather game, negative 25-degree temperatures. We already talked about it at the top. I think it matters a lot for passing. I just don't see how they're going to consistently move the ball. But, the Dolphins, again, Tyreek Hill is fantastic. Mike McDaniel's great at scheming things up. He's going to be like, what do we have him projected for? Like, got to be unbelievably highly owned here. It's going to be like 80, 90%, I would guess. 74%, Karain. So is there anyone else you consider outside of Tyreek? Or is it just kind of Tyreek or bust? I feel like there's a case to soft fade or full fade the Dolphins, to be honest.
Yeah, that's kind of, we were talking about that in Slack as well. Like, can the Dolphins really go in and win this game? If it feels really weird to fade Tyreek, but the passing situation here is going to be dicey. You mentioned the temperatures. Again, this is also like it's a night game, so the sun's going to go down. The temperature at kickoff is expected to be 1 degree, negative 18 wind chill, getting down to like negative 22 wind chill. There's also 14, 15 miles per hour winds, which isn't something I would normally adjust for in terms of, reducing passing. But when you're adding this with the temperatures, I just feel like it's going to be tough. So you could fade Tyreek, and if you still think the Dolphins have what it takes to win behind their running game, take Mostert or Achane. I like Pacheco out of this game, and I think Pacheco, if I like the Chiefs to win it at home, Dolphins are coming. They live in 75, 80 degree, 90 degree weather, and they're coming and play this. This is the nightmare. Like, I wouldn't even go outside in this weather. So. I like Pacheco in this one. I don't think this sets up well for even Mahomes or Rashee Rice or Travis Kelce really that well. And for me, Pacheco, of course, we're talking about the Dolphins, but I'm considering, because I've got this dilemma with the Tampa Eagles game, I'm considering full fading the Dolphins just betting that they don't win this game, and Tyreek has a quiet game. And I think if those two things happen, then full fading makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fair. I think the issue lies with if the Dolphins win somehow,
You're screwed.
you are borderline sunk if you don't have Tyreek the next game, because I mean he's still going to perform relatively well. I mean, you're looking at, I think last time they had like 8 for 62 in its score or something like that. I mean, again, that's like still 14, 20 points. Like that's like crazy. And so I think no matter what, that he's going to be very, very highly owned and should be. So yeah, I think that it's like a good play. You got to play him. And if somehow they win, I mean, you're really cooking there. Jeff added, no way I'm playing Hawaiian Tebow in -degree conditions. It's hilarious. No, yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, I think that I don't have much to add there on the Dolphins. It's kind of like Tyreek or nothing for me. I think you could make a play with Mostert, but with Achane healthy, I mean, he's going to get involved. It would just take like an insane a run out from Mostert, like touchdown wise, multiple big runs, things like that. And maybe in a 1 game, stably outscores Tyreek, but 2 games, I think that's really, really tough. So, yeah, so I think that makes sense there on the Dolphins. Chiefs, I think I would like Rashee Rice a little bit more than you do. I do like Pacheco, but I think Rashee Rice is pretty interesting here. I've been seeing a ton of targets on the stretch since his, routes run has increased there specifically. So I'm kind of interested in that. You didn't seem quite as interested. Any thoughts about Rice? I mean, he's like basically their clear number 1 at this point.
Yeah, Rice has been fantastic. I mean, 18.5 fantasy points since week 12, but Pacheco 21.8 in 4 games without McKinnon, and McKinnon, I believe, is out. So we're probably going to see a lot of Pacheco, maybe short passes to him as well. I do think that Rice has the better matchup. The Dolphins are 16th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to receivers. They've been second against running backs. So they have, played pretty tough rush defense, but I just lean Pacheco on this, even though his ownership percentage is higher. Kelsey is like projected to be the highest, 48%, 45%, Wecht, Karain, and ownership projections. His full season, even with the tight end premium, 17.8 fantasy points per game, which is not bad at all, especially when you're considering the state of the tight end position. I just have another tight end that I think I want to use and kind of fade Kelsey and use Pacheco, because that gives me a little bit of contrarian vibes there with the running back.
Yeah, I think Travis Kelsey is going to make us look really smart or really dumb if you fade him, because it's going to be like, of course, this guy's been dust all year. He's not going to do shit. Or it's going to be the playoffs, and then every single play in the red zone is going to go to him. And it's going to be like, of course, Travis Kelsey scored 3 touchdowns every single game. So, I don't really have the answer. I think I'm going to probably split it 1 and 1, and probably play him in 1. The other one, I don't know whether I want to do Pacheco or Rice. I mean, we're getting Rice at sub 10% ownership. Like that's, I think, a really strong leverage play as a guy who could easily outscore any of these guys. So I think that's pretty interesting.
So the other thing with Rice is that I'm thinking about the second game too. So going into Buffalo, right? Next week, if they win and Buffalo wins, 2 versus 3, like this could be another terrible weather game. So I just think this sets up for Pacheco in a 2-game sample. That's just my take. And
Pacheco's usage without McKinnon has been great in the receiving game. Massive touchdown equity. Is the definition, I would say, of a cold weather back, a guy that just like runs like a bull in a china shop, like literally just.
Is anybody going to want to tackle him? No one's going to want to tackle him.
I don't think so. I've been looking at his prop. It's like in the low 60s. I mean, I think that's a little bit light, but haven't played it yet. Jeff adds, maybe this weather will remind MBS of Green Bay that he decides not to suck and catch a couple passes. That's true. MBS might be one of the worst wideouts in the league right now. Was pretty solid in Green Bay, but has been terrible this year. All right. I don't think I have anything else to add on that game. You got anything else?
No, I think that covers Chiefs, Dolphins. How strong do you feel about the Chiefs winning that game?
So I will say this. One of the people that I know who bets the most, like makes me look like a peasant in terms of how much I bet. He took a big stand on the Chiefs early and is taking a sizable stand at 4.5, but already played it so big at like 2.5 and 3 and 3.5, whatever it opened at afterwards, that he hasn't played it anymore. So I respect that. And I think that this Dolphins defense is so beat up that, like, I mean, they're literally just signed guys off the street and are, playing them on the defensive line. So like, they're going to have 0 pass rush. So we got some friends in the back that trying to join the show.
That's my mom walking through with the dog, letting the dog out. She's got a strong take on the Chiefs.
Yeah, I was about to say, Mama Paulson, come in here. We thinking Pacheco or Rice? That's what you got to ask. Yeah, so I don't know. I would feel pretty strongly about it, to be honest. I don't, but I respect the money and the people who do. So, all right, let's see here. Browns Texans. This is an interesting game. I think a lot of people are going to fade the Texans here, but I think it was a pretty good injury report for the Texans, not as good for the Browns. Denzel Ward picked up an injury, one of their corners. Grant Delpit's still out for the Browns. This Browns defense really hasn't played a whole lot of tough competition. When they have, they've been good, but not great. Now we get Stroud. Nico Collins is back or is playing. Noah Brown looks like he's going to be back. Robert Woods looks like he's going to be okay. These guys aren't awesome, but they're at least, passable receivers outside of Nico Collins. And so I'm kind of more and more interested in the Houston side here winning and Flacco just throwing it a bunch. And if that happens, I think having Nico Collins is pretty important. So any take on, we'll start with the Texans here then. Any take on the Texans? What do you want to do with like Nico, Stroud, Singletary?
Yeah, Houston is +2 in this game. So
yep.
This is a tough one. Yeah, at home. And you discussed the receiver. It's kind of a double-edged sword for Nico, because if you with Woods and Noah Brown back, you might look at that as a downgrade for Nico because he's not going to see maybe 12, 15 targets, right? But they have a better chance of winning and playing a second game. There's more attention taken away from him, that maybe he can thrive more in the targets that he does get, because that Cleveland's going to focus on him if it's not. I mean, Woods is back, but it looked like Brown should be back as well. He had a back injury. So like putting those guys back into the projections, it wasn't too hard to kind of leave Collins where he was and take the stats away from all the other guys that were going to play if Woods and Brown didn't play, if that makes sense. So like his piece of the pie, probably with Tank Dell out, stays about the same to me. So if you think Houston wins, I think Collins is a no-brainer. Or am I?
No, I think it's a great play.
Is that too strong?
Especially, you're looking at, 37% ownership is a little bit higher than I would have guessed, but I think that's, it's basically Nico or nothing there. I think that's a really solid look here in a game that I'm just having more and more confidence in Houston potentially winning. Also like the over in this game. I think that we're going to see good back and forth here. This game combined for 140 plays last time they played. Yeah. And that was with like Case Keenum and Davis Mills, a quarterback for Houston. We're getting CJ Stroud push back here. I think it could be, just a massive shootout here. And the total is only 44.5. So pretty strong disagreement from the market there, but could be exciting. And on the Brown side here, I think you could play Amari Cooper. Again, he's coming off the 256-yard game, 270-yard game, whatever it was, against this same Houston secondary. They're a pass funnel. They can't defend deep. Flacco loves to check it deep. I think Amari is very much in play as well, but he's kind of been limited all week. He's basically always limited. Any thoughts on this Brown side here?
Yeah, the Browns are interesting as well. Amari Cooper, 21% WECT, 38% projection ownership for Crane. Flip it to Njoku, 28% for WECT, 25% for Crane. So those two disagree on which player is going to be the most rostered, Cooper or Njoku. To me, given the state of the tight end position, and David Njoku, 21.2 fantasy points with Flacco, Amari Cooper, 22.9 fantasy points with Flacco. The tough thing with this is that that Cooper had that monster game against the Texans not too long ago. So that's tough to put out of your mind if you wanted to pull the trigger on Njoku. And he's the tight end I think I like the most of all these tight ends that we're talking about, given which team he's on, the matchup, and just the state of the tight end position in general. 21.2 with Flacco.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crushed. And Darren brings up a good point. Like, if we're not going to go with Kelsey, if we're not going to go with Likely as an option now with Andrews coming back, what other tight ends make sense? We talked about Laporta at like 0.1% ownership that, some people are locked in on. But I think that we're looking at, this is a great spot here for Njoku potentially. Is Dalton Schultz an option? That seems like with all the other options coming back, probably not for me. But I do think that a guy like Njoku, especially if you think the Browns are going to win, I think that could be a good spot. I do think that both of these teams, though, like even if they win, if they advance, they're both fun, interesting offenses that have good skill players. So like compared to, I guess other spots here like the Steelers. You're don't want to pick one of those guys, even if you get into the second round somehow miraculously as well. So yeah, I think that Njoku's an interesting play. I think Amari's an interesting play. I think you can also, again, if you want to soft fade the Browns here and you really feel good about Houston, you can play the Browns defense potentially because I think that we're looking at a spot where Stroud's probably going to get sacked a decent amount. He's probably going to throw a pick or two. So they will score points. It's just a matter of what you expect to happen here with the offense. And I think a shootout here is pretty likely.
Yeah. One last note on Njoku. I think my averages for the last 4 games was with Flacco. He did have a quiet game at Rams, 2 for 17 on 6 targets with Flacco in Flacco's first start. But the last 4, 6 for 91 and 2 on 8 targets, 10 for 104 and 1 on 14 targets, 6 for 44 and 1 on 9 targets. And that was against Houston, that last matchup. And then 6 for 134 and 8 against the Jets, which was a lower volume game for Flacco, where he still threw for 300 yards. You mentioned that earlier. But Njoku still got there, 6 for 134 on 8 targets. So just really incredible production for him with Joe Flacco.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's a very good play. And I think you could reasonably talk yourself into Cooper, talk yourself into Njoku or Collins from that game. I think all those 3 are pretty solid plays, depending on how many lineups you're doing. Cool. I think, we're on to the last game. Your darlings here. The Packers are going to Dallas, 7-point dog. Did get a little bit of money. It was 7.5 for a little while. Now got some money at 7. Our sides and totals guy, Sharp Clark, thinks the Packers are going to win outright. And then I've seen some people say that Dallas is going to beat him by 30. So I'm very excited to see what happens in this game. My take is I think it's going to be super high scoring. We're looking at the Packers here in a spot where I don't think their defense is as good as they're chalked up to be. And I also think that Jordan Love should be able to take advantage of this Cowboys defense that gets pressure, but under pressure, Jordan Love has an 11.8 average depth of target, literally just chucks the ball downfield, is averaging 7.8 yards per attempt. I love the aggressiveness. So I think this game could get pretty fun pretty quick. But let's start on the Packers side here. I think you played Aaron Jones in your initial one here, but I think Jaden Reed could be pretty solid leverage as well. What's your take on the Packers?
Yeah, those 2 are the ones I'm considering or perhaps full fading, but I have a tough time doing that to my Packers. I do think that they're a live dog in this game. And the reason I say that is not because I believe in their defense or anything like that. It's just Joe Barry's defenses have a weird way of showing up when the chips are down or they're a severe underdog, and then they don't show up at all when they should dominate, like against the Bucs or against the Giants in that Monday night game, like terrible. But they, when they're playing a really good team, they tend to have a really good game plan and they figure it out. And they somehow it's almost like I kind of liken it to like when I played college basketball and I go play pickup at the Y, and there's this try hard player who never, barely played in his high school team, but he's defending me, but he's not in the right spots. Like, he's doing weird things that I'm not expecting a good defender to do, and it throws off my game, my offensive game. It's sort of like that. It's like the Packers are so weird and so bad sometimes that they end up confusing the offense. And, they did a good job against, Jared Goff with all those turnovers and, pressuring him. And then Mahomes, they managed to shut him down, and relatively speaking. So I do think that they're a live dog in this game. They're obviously, the offense is quite hot. I think that's safe to say that this is a real deal. They might be getting Christian Watson back. Romeo Doubs looks like he's going to play. Jaden Reed's been fantastic. Dontavian Wicks has been fantastic. Bo Melton has been fantastic. They've got 2 good tight ends. So I agree with your assessment that this is probably going to be a high scoring game. As far as this contest is concerned, to me, that points to Aaron Jones. He's got lower ownership projections than Jaden Reed. And even though Jaden Reed has outscored him since week 10, 17.4, Aaron Jones, 16.1 in 7 games with at least 9 carries. He's got 15.8 in his last 3 games with no touchdowns. So I think he's probably due for some touchdown regression. And if they can win this game, I think Jones probably outscores any of these guys for the Packers in a 2-3 game stretch, other than Jordan Love. The other thing with Reed is that with all these receivers back, I don't think his target floor is as high. We don't know if Watson's back yet, but I don't think his target floor is as high if Dobbs, Watson, Wicks, Melton are all healthy.
Yeah, no, totally agree there. 2 notes here. We just got the practice report from the Packers. AJ Dillon did not practice again. I would assume that he's likely out for this game, which also increases, Aaron Jones's like carry floor, I think. And then his pass game usage is still solid. So I think that helps increase his floor and raises his ceiling. So all that's good for Aaron Jones. The bad news, Jair Alexander did not practice again after picking up an ankle injury last practice, which again, any late week injuries that now you're DNP twice, you're probably not playing. If you are playing, you're probably not going to be very good. So I don't think that I think that's a really bad thing for the Packers defense here, especially when we're moving over to the other side here. CeeDee Lamb, I think Crane has been 90% ownership. I don't know what the other guys do. I mean, I don't blame them. This is such a good matchup for him. They move him into the slot. They move him out wide. Like Dallas's offense has been super aggressive post the bye. They were awesome passing the ball. Like the Packers defense, the best quarterbacks they played were like, I don't know, Kirk Cousins early in the season, maybe like Jared Goff. Like they've played 0 passing offenses that are like caliber to this level outside of like maybe Mahomes. But again, this Chiefs passing offense hasn't really been all that good this year. So it's one of those things that this team is playing really well or has played well in the past. And so I'm interested in you need exposure to this passing game. Like I think whether it's Lamb or Dak, worst case, but I think you absolutely need to play Lamb, to be honest.
Yeah, Lamb is a lock for me. And you also like, even if you look at it and you're trying to talk yourself into Dak, with the Cowboys probably going to the Super Bowl, on the flip side, you probably want the AFC quarterback. You probably want Lamar Jackson. You probably want Josh Allen. You probably want Patrick Mahomes if you want to go that far down the AFC rabbit hole in a game with CeeDee Lamb. So you probably don't want to use Dak with one of the other players from one of those other teams. Certainly not the Ravens. I don't see a player there that would intrigue me with Dak or I'd want with Dak. I don't, the Bills with Diggs and, we talked about it, maybe James Cook with Dak. I don't know, but that'd be very contrarian. I did see some stats with blanking on the name, but maybe I'll put it on Twitter, but retweet it on Twitter. But she was just talking about it was Barnwell and Mina Kimes. They were talking about how bad the Packers are over the middle of the field, like league worst. And that's where Dak likes to throw. So I think there's definitely a strong case for Lamb there. You could maybe go contrarian with Ferguson, but I think that's overthinking it because there's other ways, as we've outlined, that you can go and be unique without giving up the massive upside of CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, the more that we talk about it, like I would love to play Dak in a contrarian spot here, but the issue is, like you said, the options on Buffalo, the options on Baltimore just aren't really all that good outside of like Josh Allen or like, especially on Baltimore, like it just gets a little bit messy, like outside of Lamar Jackson there. So it's almost thinking like Lamar Jackson, CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey are just locks, and then you just got to get interesting elsewhere because it's just really hard for me to envision a scenario where those guys don't really work. So again, I'm doing at least 2 lineups, probably a third tonight. I'm probably going to have those 2 split. I'll probably have Lamar Jackson and then either a Josh Allen or a Dak Prescott lineup. Maybe I'll have one of each. That's probably, in my mind, the best option for it, but we'll see. Do you have any other, before we hop off here, any other takeaways kind of from our conversations today? Because I love doing this, love talking about it. That kind of helps me think more about, where we're at and like different plays and what we should be focusing on.
Well, I'm no further along as to who I'm going to fade or full fade. I still don't know. I do think one switch I did make is the, going to a receiver for the Rams. I think that made sense. And if they do pull off the upset, you could see them doing well in the second game as well. But yeah, I've got some tough decisions to make before lock tomorrow because it's tough. It's tough out there in the streets with these full fades and these soft fades.
Yeah,
it's the Philly Tampa game. It's killing me.
Yeah, it's interesting because normally in Wild Card Weekend you have 2 to 3 games where it's like a 10-point spread. Maybe 8. We have 7 points for the Packers and then 10 points for the Bills. That second game is going to be pretty ugly with the 10-point game with the weather. And then the other games are all just like 3 points, 4 points, 2 points. Like they're all really close. And it matters a lot for this contest because I mean, you just can't really have blanks running in your contest for more than a week, like it's like max. So that's kind of the issue there. So I think figuring out who's going to win and like taking your stands that way is just as important as taking your stands from a leverage perspective. So, wish you guys nothing but the best. If you have any questions or thoughts about it, feel free to DM us on Twitter or Discord or anything. But yeah, awesome. Paul, that was a lot of fun. If you guys wanted to join these contests with us, myffpc.com, $200 or $35 entries. And then as always, thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel here. For John, I'm Connor. We will see you guys here maybe next week. Who knows? Maybe we'll do another one next week. We can talk about it later offline. See you guys.